Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s. This is my podcast that I do every week. Try to do every week. I've only missed 2 weeks. Where we go back in time to my favorite time period, the 1990s. This week we're going back to toward the end of the decade. We're going back to February of 1999. We're on episode 49, so let's go.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
I pick a random month and year from the 90s and I just go with it. But like I said, we're in February 1999. This is my second trip through 1999. Like I said, I pick a random month and year, but this time seemed to end up on February. And the last time I did, well, the only other time I'd done the 90s was like back on episode 11. That was January. So kind of going through the year there and not meaning to. I mean, the next one could be the end of the year, which I'll be talking some of all the Y2K stuff and everything in the December episode. But anyway, this is February of 99. I was 15 years old and in 8th grade at the time. Last time I did this podcast, I had mistakenly said I was in 9th grade because I misjudged the years. I did fail 1 year of 7th grade. No, it wasn't math. Oh yeah, I guess technically I failed all the classes just from not doing my work. But anyway, I got that wrong on the last one where I said I was in 9th grade. Going back and finding my old yearbook from this year in 8th grade confirmed that I was wrong on that, and I thought I was the whole time, but it's like something in my head made me think that. Anyway, before we get into the episode, I do want to mention there's going to be a bonus episode coming out. The bonus episodes are not just strictly from the 90s stuff. It's, all time periods. But this is my 13th bonus episode, and actually the 1 year anniversary of my very first one. Last year for October, for Halloween, I did my top 50 horror movies of all time. This year I'm going to do a little bit different, but still in that Halloween theme. It's going to release on October 30th, which is Thursday, day before Halloween. And it's my top 10 favorite horror anthology TV shows and my top 10 favorite horror anthology movies. Everybody knows my favorite type of horror is the anthology horror. It's great. But yeah, that'll be coming out then. That's the bonus episode. But we're going to get started with a little bit of horror here, talking about some books that came out. These are Goosebumps books. The main series had been over. I just watched a documentary recently. It was fascinating about why Goosebumps kind of ended, and it was a whole lawsuit between Scholastic, which published the books, and R.L. Stine, who obviously wrote the books, and they tried to accuse him of having ghost writers, and it violated this, and just a whole bunch of stupid crap. Anyway, and then the Harry Potter books came out, which Scholastic put out, and of course that was their new cash cow, so they didn't even care about keeping the Goosebumps name. They still published the books, but they just not hardly any emphasis went into them, which Goosebumps is not what made Scholastic, but what really put them on the map with those, they mutually helped each other. The Scholastic Book Fairs definitely propelled the Goosebumps sales, but at the same time, Goosebumps was the big book for Scholastic. Without that, they wouldn't have had that big name brand to hang their hat on, which they got with Larry. I don't know who Larry is. The old homeless guy that used to hang out at our house in the 90s named Larry. No, later on, I was trying to say. Later on would be Harry Potter. I was trying to say later and Harry, and it came out Larry. Anyway, 2 Goosebumps books were released this month. Give Yourself Goosebumps, which I'm working my way through that series from the beginning. It's the choose your own adventure type books for Goosebumps. It's really fun. I'm on the 3rd one, I think. Welcome to Batwing Hall. I just read through it once. Of course, I failed. And those are almost all of them. You die, or it's implied that you die. Don't really say you die as a kid on there. Just like in the Choose Your Own Adventure books, it don't come out right and say you die, but basically you die. Anyway, this time they're on episode. I guess it's episode issue number 33. It came from the internet, which of course 1999 the internet was blowing up then, with dial-up, of course. Well, I just got a new Halloween animatronic for free today, and I think it just blew over outside in the wind. I may have to anchor that down. I'll go out there and get that later. Anyway, back to February of 1999 when we ain't thinking about Halloween. The other book to come out this month was the Goosebumps 2000 series, which was just a series they came out with. Because they were naming everything this 2000. It came out like earlier than 99, but it seemed like towards the middle to the end of the 99 or the 90s, they seemed to put 2000 on everything to make it sound futuristic. Anyway, this is book number 14 called Jekyll and Heidi. I've never even heard of the book or read it. I've never read any of the Goosebumps 2000 series. Definitely think about checking those out. Sorry, you either get two sounds on this podcast. You get the air conditioner in the background, or like today, I got the door open, so I don't have that noise in the background. We get the dogs barking at every little noise out there. But anyway, we're going to move on to talk about TV now. Definitely some things going on in TV. Digital cable has certainly expanded everything. Originally you had cable and you had your like 30 channels, and then it expanded to like 60. Well, digital cable, you go up into the hundreds, and they inflated those numbers sometimes. Like they would skip whole hundreds of numbers and move up to like channel 800, make it sound like you had more. But still, there was still a lot more channels, and they were constantly adding channels. If everybody remembers the preview channel, where they would show previews of movies, and it'd usually be pay-per-views, but it'd also be other things. Sometimes infomercials in the middle of the night, but it would be a running guide of what was on. Everybody remembers that. It's like if you wanted to find out what's on TV, if you didn't have an actual TV guide with you, or when they expanded to digital cable, the cable companies actually put out their own guides each month and sent them in the mail. Those were really cool. But it was called Preview Channel, and you miss your channel and you had to wait for it to come around. Well, TV Guide apparently, I guess, purchased this channel and renamed it the TV Guide channel. So a lot of people remember that. I remember watching a game show that was actually on that channel. It's called Hollywood Showdown. It's where they'd have trivia and stuff, and two people battle on the stage, and whoever wins gets to stay up there and keep going. Really cool show, and it was all on you'd watch most of it on that little screen while they're rolling through the listings. Different time they have now, of course, streaming and of course with the digital cable they came out with that on-screen guide, which was like the greatest thing ever. You could see a couple days in advance, and then later it'd be like I think something like 30 days in advance. But really seeing a lot of changes in TV from the start of the decade in the 90s to the end of it. You start out with those cable boxes with, like I said, 30 channels, and then they expanded to like 60 something. And originally they had the cable box with like this long like square that would like sometimes even attach by cord to the channel, and you would push individual buttons for each channel, and there'd be like in the middle a little square with like the channel numbers and names on them, and you push the button next to it. It wouldn't be like the normal button remote where you push a number. And of course now with the digital cable remotes and DVRs and just, man, a lot of changes. Speaking of that, HBO of course had been big. I think it started in the late 70s. Of course, my favorite thing on HBO of all time is Tales from the Crypt. But they actually debuted their 4th HBO channel at this time, HBO Family, where they would put on, obviously stuff that kids could watch, because a lot of stuff on HBO kids weren't watching. I mean, during the day, it wasn't like some of the outrageous stuff, and of course, everybody remembers late at night on HBO and Cinemax, the movie channel and Showtime, the late night adult films where they weren't full like pornographic movies, but they were like what they call softcore or whatever, and kids, as kids, we called it, we seen parts. We said the dumbest stuff as kids. But yeah, that was always on all those shows, but that definitely wasn't on HBO Family at night. I don't know what they even had on at night then, because kids are supposed to be asleep, but I'm sure they probably had something on. Debut of a show was The Planet's Funniest Animals, on the Animal Planet, which was a newer channel. I didn't watch that at the time. I watched that probably the early to mid 2000s with my grandpa Wally, because he was always watching that show. He just had his certain shows he watched all the time. Seinfeld, Sanford and Son, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno he never missed. And a lot of these shows I fell in love with because of him, but he loved watching them. He would just crack up at these animals doing these goofy things, especially the dogs. I just got a kick out of him laughing so hard and enjoying these shows. One show that ended that didn't really get its due was called Brimstone. It was a Fox series. It only lasted 13 episodes. I don't even know if it got a conclusion to the first season. But it's about starred John Glover as like the devil. But it's about this guy who's a cop, and he wasn't really a bad person, but I can't remember the exact story. But anyway, he got sent to hell, but he could leave under one condition: if he brought all these demons back for, basically made a deal with the devil. So he has to deal with him every week, and he's always on there just making annoying comments to him. And it was a really good show, and they just, for whatever reason, it didn't catch on, and it was gone quickly. Code Red, by the way. I don't like the new Mountain Dew logos. It don't look like Code Red. Nothing will ever be as good as Surge, of course, but can't help that. Coca-Cola doesn't want to bring it back. They brought it back in like 2015, but after that, screw you people, you don't want it, even though people literally bought them all off the shelves. What does that tell you? You don't ever see empty Coke things, but you see empty Surge everywhere. Once it was released, it was gone within like 5 minutes. Or maybe I'm exaggerating there, but it was gone within a day or two. And, they just couldn't keep enough in stock. You'd think maybe there's a market for this. Maybe we'll just bring it back on a regular basis and see how long it lasts. We can always stop it if it's not selling, but they didn't care. Anyway, enough rant on that. But it is in the 90s at least. I'm not getting out of the 90s there. A show they brought back, which I didn't even realize, because as a kid you watch stuff on Nickelodeon, you just think it goes on forever. You may see reruns, but some stuff you're like, it goes on forever. I didn't realize that Are You Afraid of the Dark had been off the air for, I think, like 4 years. But they brought it back for 2 more seasons on Nickelodeon in '99. If you guys remember the main character, always reminds me of Harry Potter. I mentioned him before, but the kid with the glasses, he always seemed, I don't know if he was the main character, but he seemed like it. His name was Gary. Anyway, he ended up introducing his younger brother Tucker at some point. Well, Tucker's the one that comes back to start the Midnight Society, and then the 2 seasons of that. And I know there's been a recent one, and there's been like a couple parts of the being at like a carnival. I remember seeing that, but I think there was like a full season of this released recently. I just haven't watched it. Just like with the new Goosebumps, I just haven't watched it. Mostly out of fear of like it would be crap, but also out of just having so much stuff to do all the time. But yeah, they brought that back, and it should have stayed on the air. But and then one final thing that aired as a 3-part miniseries on ABC was Stephen King's Storm of the Century. He never released an actual book of this, but if you look it up like at the library or something and find it, it's actually the screenplay of it. So if you don't like reading, you only like reading books or something, you probably won't want to watch that, because it's word for word, because he wrote it as a screenplay. He didn't write it as a book. But it reminds me a lot of Needful Things. It's about this guy that comes to town, and all these murders and horrible things start happening, and it's kind of implied that he's the devil, like a lot of Stephen King's characters are. But what ends up happening is, the only way the town can make him leave is if they agree to what he asks, and what he asks is for one of the town's kids to go with him, basically, be his son, basically. And, for some reason, they can't get rid of him, and the whole town votes to reluctantly, not like they want to give up somebody to do it, except one person, and I believe it was the constable, or is it one? I believe it was a lawman, because they were on an island, unlike the normal one where they're in Maine. But a lot of Stephen King's books actually take place on islands and stuff, not just Stephen King's version of Maine. But anyway, and of course by a lottery, the kid that was chosen ended up being this guy's kid, and even his own wife voted for the kid to be taken, just so that way everybody else could be left to live. And of course, like I said, the guy is the main character, basically is the only one to vote against it. But that reluctantly he takes the kid, and the guy ends up leaving his wife and completely leaving the island and going somewhere else. And then years later, he sees the guy walking down the street with his kid and recognizes him, and he like turns around and he takes off his glasses, and he has this like evil look in his eyes, and just it's a really good story. I'd only seen it recently a few years ago. I have it on DVD, but really good story. Like I said, it reminds me a whole lot of Needful Things. But like I said, it was just written as a miniseries, so it's one of those occasions where you can't say, oh, the book was better than, because it literally, the book is the screenplay. There's no differences. You read the script word for word, which is pretty cool, if you got people that would want to, act that out or something, or record your own, radio drama or something. I don't know. There might be people that do that for podcasts. That'd be pretty cool to do. But anyway, we're going to move on and talk about one of my favorite things to talk about on here is kids' meal toys. Of course, more commonly known as the Happy Meal toys. They were definitely putting out a lot of stuff then. McDonald's had a set of 8 toys based on Disney's Mulan movie, which had just recently been released on the VHS, which at that time was a big deal. I don't know if they had DVDs then. They might, in '99 they might have had it out on DVD, but of course, then you'd have the movie released in the theaters, and then the next big step was, especially around this time, was pay-per-view and then home video releases. You'd either get it from the library or you would, go out outright and buy it. But anyway, these were 8 toys based on Mulan. They were spinning tops and pop-up toys and launch toys, where things launch off of them. Those type of toys. Burger King had cat dog toys from the Nickelodeon series, featuring 6 different character toys and vehicles from Cat Dog. Wendy's had Bobby's World, which I didn't realize was still on then, was still that big of a deal that they made kids' meal toys out of it. But Bobby's World, one of my favorite cartoons of all time. Fox Kids show, obviously. They had 6 character toys based on that cartoon. KFC had something called Jim Henson's Scary Scary Monster Toys. And they were based off of a book series. It wasn't, I don't believe it was a TV or anything, but everybody remembers those, the Muppets, one of my favorite ones, Gonzo, his book, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but there was a few of those, Sesame Street characters, just basically in the Jim Henson world that were released, just book releases from, the little golden books. Those are some of my favorite things to read. Taco Bell had a set of 6 character toys from the Animorphs TV show / book series, because it was a book series that was made into a TV show. Sort of like a knockoff on the Transformers, but using animals. Before Transformers, knocked them off with their Beast Wars, which I did not like. My brothers Josh and Travis were in love with the Beast Wars show. I cannot stand that cartoon for some reason. I don't know why. I guess because I never really watched I know, big shock here to a lot of people. I never watched the Transformers really in the 80s. For some reason, it just wasn't my thing. I was always watching G.I. Joe instead, I guess. But, just one of them things you just never get into that everybody else seems to love. It's it's almost like you're mad at yourself. It's why couldn't you have got into that then? But anyway, Pizza Hut was really giving out some cool stuff. They were giving out PlayStation demo discs. And some of the discs even came with discs. I said discs. They were giving out discs. Some of those even came with some toys. But there was 2 discs. And depending on which one you got, you'd have demos for games such as Crash Bandicoot Racing, Final Fantasy VII, Tetris, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, which I remember having that on a demo disc from Sega Dreamcast, which of course releases in November of '99, so that's not out yet here. But I remember playing that first level on that forever on that. Tomb Raider, Spyro, Gran Turismo 2, and some others. You get a lot of demos, and for people that can't afford these games, sometimes you just play these demos over and over again, but it was still fun, and it really made you want these games, if you like the gameplay. But really cool things to give out there by Pizza Hut, demo discs, those weren't cheap. I know they weren't the full games or anything, but, and of course everybody remembers the demo discs that came from PlayStation Magazine back then. They would come out with those all the time. We had some of those too when we had a PlayStation. I believe we'd had the PlayStation, not at this time because, I'll get into home life towards the end of the podcast. We've got a lot to go over with that one, actually. Some of it won't be as funny as I try to make everything else, but just to kind of talk about the whole over, because this was the month, I don't remember the exact date, but this was the month we actually left Norwood to go live with grannies and start a whole new chapter in our lives and everything. But yeah, this was actually the month of that. Because, yeah. So, anyway, that'll be towards the end of the podcast. But yeah, really cool to give out demo discs there. Not a lot to talk about in sports. Because, the NFL season had just wrapped up. January 31st was the Super Bowl. But there was one game that they still played after the Super Bowl then, and people actually played the game to try to win, was the Pro Bowl. Now, I kind of like the way they do it now with all the activities and stuff, you know, because football is a rough game for people to, especially since they put the Pro Bowl now before the Super Bowl, because a lot of people lose interest on football, they realized after the Super Bowl, but still a lot of people watch the Pro Bowl then. But, you know, I get the not wanting, you know, people not wanting to, like, put everything on the line, you know, when it's not, you know, because there have been some people that have gotten injured that have, you know, had to miss a full year because of the injury and, you know, just for an exhibition game. So I get that of why they do it now, but I still miss kind of the old way they did it. But anyway, the AFC beat the NFC 23-10. And being February, of course, as the NASCAR season kicked off, Jeff Gordon won the Daytona 500, and then Mark Martin won this race called the Duralube/Big K 400. Don't know what any of that is, but that was at Rockingham. And then Dale Jarrett actually won his only NASCAR championship that year. Of course, that would be in November later in the year, because NASCAR is a long season. They go from February to November, and depending on the time period, there's all kinds of different ways they earn points, and the playoff system came in later on, but, you know, it's confusing. But how about music now? This was actually the time period I started listening to pop music. And I don't know why. I think it was a combination of the kids in school listening to it a lot and hearing some of it. And not that I was, like, unhappy with country music, because I still loved it. It's just, I don't know, for something made me start to broaden my listening horizons that I'd never done before prior to 99. I don't know. Maybe it's just being a teenager, hearing some songs, and, you know, some of the songs weren't necessarily good. They were like those guilty pleasure type songs, or just things that get stuck in your head. But the Billboard Hot 100 charts, Britney Spears' Baby One More Time, her huge debut single, was number one for 1 week, and then it was also number one a week back in January, so it was 2 weeks total. But I remember seeing this video when it first came out. It was this Much Music channel, which I later learned was like a Canadian thing. Before they had their own channel, it was on channel 25, which showed ECW in our town. It was, you know, later became the WB, and the SmackDown would debut on that later that year on I think it was UPN. But anyway, it became one of those guilty pleasure videos, and you can just imagine me being 15 at the time and hormones and everything, what I was watching this video for. But yeah, but that's really, you know, during those times when I started getting into this music, besides the looks of the videos. But another song that I remember fondly is Angel of Mine by Monica, which I'd never even heard of. I haven't heard a lot of these people that I started listening to then. It was a pretty big hit. It went number one for 3 weeks, and then 1 week in March for 4 weeks total. But yeah, the first time the pop charts, I remember, you know, listening to the music. Like I said, I wasn't not listening to country music at the time. It's just, I don't know, something just made me start expanding my horizons. But the American Country Countdown, Stand Beside Me by Jody Messina, was number one for 2 weeks, plus a week back in January, so that was 3 weeks total. That was a pretty big song of hers. But she had a big run there, the mid to late 90s, with some of those songs, you know, Bye Bye, I'm Alright, you know, and even her first, not her first song, but her first big song was, you know, Heads Carolina, Tails California. But, you know, she had a big run there. Like, I'm surprised she wasn't like a superstar, like Shania Twain status, more than she was. You know, she ended up being just one of the ones from the 90s that would end up having a few hits in the 2000s, but mostly fading, you know, sadly. A lot of the good talent that came out in that time period don't get talked about a lot. Mark Chestnut went number one for 2 weeks with I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, which was, of course, a cover of the Aerosmith song. I've heard some reports that he didn't really want to record this because, you know, it was Aerosmith's song for one had just come out, and they had a monster hit with that from the Armageddon soundtrack. And, you know, it wasn't his type of song anyway, but he recorded it because his label wanted him to, and it still was it was a massive, I think it was his biggest, like, chart-wise, his biggest song. And, you know, he still sings in concert because a lot of people love it, but it's still, you know, it's not as good as his, you know, country or songs, but I think they did a really good job of making this an actual country version and not him trying to sound like he's singing pop music. You know, they had, you know, the instruments that Mark Chestnut would use on a record, not, you know, a whole bunch of, you know, they had electric guitar in it, but, you know, they had the steel guitar too. I think it would have been cool if they'd have found some way for him and Aerosmith to somehow do this. It would have been awkward, but it also would have been just interesting to see. Alright, I'm back, and I say I'm back because I'll give full disclosure. Recently I've been taking breaks about halfway through filming these, just because I've been getting kind of tongue-tied as I go through these, and also, like, I don't know, my throat starts to hurt, my whole, like, jaw starts to hurt, like heart attack type stuff, but, like, just from all the constant talking, so I've been taking a break halfway through. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody right here in the middle of this, or I don't know if it's the actual middle of it, but it's the middle of the topics I'm talking about. Just thank everybody for either watching or listening to the podcast. It's mostly watching. I've been getting a lot of comments. Some of the same people have been commenting, so I know some of you have been watching, regularly now, and I thank you guys for that. Seriously, been a lot going on in my head recently about some things that have happened in the wrestling world I'm a part of, and I'm not going to get into any details, and I was actually really, like, mad before I even started recording this. I was going to make a whole video afterwards just blasting everything, but I've kind of calmed down. It's and just filming this podcast and, reminiscing and having fun and everything really seemed to calm me down. So even if nobody watches this, it's fun to do, and I'll continue doing it. And once I get through all the years and the months of the 90s, I'll figure out where to go next and what to talk about next. But, this is something I definitely can see myself doing forever, potentially, till I'm not on Earth anymore. But I just want to thank you guys for giving me an outlet to talk, or to make stupid videos, the Crackhead Dave, or, react to music videos and sing songs on here. Just, it's meant more than anybody could possibly imagine, being able to do this. But anyway, back to the podcast. I'm sorry, getting a little out there. Talk about fast food. We recently talked about Taco Bell earlier with the... were they the ones? No, Pizza Hut had the demo disc. Taco Bell had the Animorph stuff. But Taco Bell was coming out with a... everybody remembers, especially this time period, Taco Bell, like, being the place, Of course, McDonald's is always known as the big shot when it comes to fast food, but the whole environment of Taco Bell then, just, the look outside and inside the restaurant, you felt like you were at a Taco Bell then. It's just sad to look at what they've become as far as, like, their whole, the whole construction of the restaurant, as far, that looked like a Taco Bell then. Taco Bell today, just like with the McDonald's of today and all these other restaurants, Wendy's, they just look like depressed, I call them the depressed adults, is what they look like. They look like they're designed by depressed people, not caring about fun, they don't look inviting, they don't look like come and eat here. They look like some kind of warehouses or factories or something, Get back to these unique things. So I'm so glad that most of the White Castles that I've been to still look like White Castles. It's just, they're trying to modernize everything, and people don't want that. People like nostalgia. You don't have to make it look like it did back in the 90s, but maybe you do. Maybe you have a couple booths that are set up just to look like the 90s. Maybe you have the original tables or style of the original. A couple of them look like the 80s or something. Make that a selling point, like, come out and sit at our 90s booth, or sit at, and maybe even they have, the menu style, or not menu, but, just the way everything looks then. If you're sitting there, maybe you get a special cup that, just, I don't know, something like that. But just, they don't care anymore, because most of business is done through drive-through and DoorDash and crap now. So they don't really care about the inside and even the outside look of it. But I think if they put more effort into it, they would end up getting more business. But anyway, Taco Bell back then, like I said, with the look of it, you knew you were at a Taco Bell. Another thing that's different now, the Cinnamon Twists don't taste near the same. And I'm not just like, because my tastes have changed. My wife agrees. A bunch of other people that I know that had Cinnamon Twists back then agree. They don't taste the same. I don't know if it's a different oil they used, a different seasoning, different recipe. They do not taste the same. Every once in a while, you'll get a few that'll actually remind you of the good old days of the Cinnamon Twist. Back then, gotta have a Cinnamon Twist. Nowadays, I don't even get them because they're nasty to me anymore. They just don't taste right. But of course, back then, Taco Bell, you couldn't beat their prices. They're $59, $69, like 79-cent menu, where you could get a taco for 59 cents, a Taco Supreme for 79 cents. I think it's Taco Supreme today is like $2. and a regular taco is like over $1, I think, or at $1, I don't know. You know, but they had the chili cheese burritos. Back when they had the Mexican pizza, which I don't care about. I recently made a post about how they brought that back, and I was like, I don't care about it. And people are like, what, you don't like that? No, I don't. But anyway, one of the things that I really don't like about Taco Bell these days is the way that they take stuff. It's their business model, and it seems to be working for them, but I don't like it. Just as a general preference, I don't like it. Like I said, it works for them, but this practice of taking stuff off the menu to bring it back to big fanfare and big promotion, like, oh, we gotta go get it now. They do this all the time with the nacho fries. Nacho fries are gone again. Like, something like that has become such a big thing for them, and people buy them all the time. Why take them away? And the reason is money hungry. Because they take it away, they replace it with this other stuff that they bring back that people have been wanting. And then that goes away, and then, oh, we're going to bring your nacho fries. We've heard you. We've listened. I've heard that all the time. Like, we've listened to our fans. Now, if you listen to them, you wouldn't take all this stuff away. But anyway, that's their big plan, is to, you know, bring stuff back, and then people rush out to get it over and over again, and then, because they know it's going to be gone, you know, it's just, as a business model, I get it. You know, it probably drives their profits up, but as, you know, as a service to your customers, it's just crappy, if you ask me. Like, keep the stuff around that people want, you know. And then they introduce all this stuff like their chicken nuggets and all this stuff, which is fine. It's just like, people aren't going to Taco Bell for chicken nuggets. I mean, they taste good and everything. You know, you can keep them, you can make those like every once in a while. But all the stuff like nacho fries, it should be a staple. I know, I'm like making a political speech for my nacho fries. Vote for me in September, even though the election's not till November. Vote early. Vert. Anyway, enough of that. Talk about video games that were released. One that was released was WCW Nitro for Nintendo 64, which I did not even realize they released Nitro for Nintendo 64. It was released over a year ago, back in like January of '98 for PlayStation, and then like November of '98 for Windows, which is the first place I seen that, when Steve had it, which I'll be talking about Steve in a little bit. He got it for Windows, but the game was updated for the time period for Nintendo 64, but it's just a pretty unremarkable game from what I've seen of it. I played it a little bit on the PlayStation 1, and it's just, it was mostly known for the wrestlers like insulting you as you're going like to pick the wrestlers, you know, using full video, because what they could do with discs now. And I don't know if they had that on Nintendo 64 or not. Like I said, this is the first time I heard of that. I never realized they released that as a game for 64. But yeah, the game was pretty just unremarkable. Wasn't too much fun in it. And then another game that was released that I've only played a couple times on the emulator, but led to the second game, which I played over and over on Nintendo 64, was Mario Party. Now, the one I have experience with was Mario Party 2 and 3. I played Mario Party 1 a little bit, but this, you know, the very first Mario Party, you can't just gloss over it. Like I said, it led to one of my favorite games of all time. So many hours playing Mario Party 2 with my brothers, and then so many hours later playing Mario Party 6 and 7, get the GameCube game on the Wii, because, you know, the Wii could play the GameCube with my wife and kids. We played that for forever and ever on the the GameCube portion of the Nintendo Wii. You know, you hook the GameCube controllers in. Just so much fun to be had in those, and Mario Party 8 we had for the Wii U. That was just, those games are so fun. Was it Mario Party 8 or was it 9? I think it was 9. I think I'm Mario Kart. Anyway, I'm confusing that. Both Mario Kart and Mario Party 2, I played non-stop on the Nintendo 64. I mean, I had those Mario Kart courses memorized. Those themes on Mario Party 2, like you go, it's like a board game. You know, go on the Western theme, the almost the Halloween theme. Just so much fun. I got the emulators, and all the, you know, going around the board, and of course the party games, and I mastered so many of those games. Just so much fun with that stuff. And one news item to report: old Bill Clinton got acquitted by the U.S. Senate during his impeachment trial on February 12th. So good for him, I guess. That whole debacle with Monica Lewinsky and I did not have sex with that woman and all that stuff. And just like I talked about my grandpa earlier, watching Jay Leno. He had so much stuff about Bill Clinton on the Tonight Show. But right now we're going to take a look at a Nickelodeon lineup from February 2nd of 1999. I picked another random date of this month. And this happens to be a Tuesday, so it's a weekday lineup. I was not watching a lot of Nickelodeon at this time. Growing up and, having other interests and, times without cable and just, So I don't know exactly what we're getting with this lineup here. But of course the thing I use is called Fandom. It's like a Wikipedia type thing. But they have, full lineups that I guess they've gotten out of TV guides and people's personal collections. But of course they start at midnight with Nick at Night. We've got the Brady Bunch. Can't go wrong with that. Happy Days. Love that one too. Then we got the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Dick Van Dyke Show, Taxi, Newhart. The Jeffersons. I haven't seen that on Nick at Night on going through this yet. Love the Jeffersons. Of course that's a spinoff of All in the Family. Laverne and Shirley, I Love Lucy, one of my mom's favorites. Bewitched, one of my wife's favorites. Happy Days Again, Mary Tyler Moore Show. We got one called Teacher to Teacher with Mr. Wizard. I don't remember that. I'm going to look that up real quick because I talked many times before about loving the Mr. Wizard's world, where Mr. Wizard was sort of like everybody else had their Bill Nye and Beekman's world. Mine was Mr. Wizard. It would always be on at 6 in the morning like this is before school and learn about science, especially for me who didn't have any interest in science. I was bad at the subject. But what is this Teacher for Teacher with Mr. Wizard? Or Teacher to Teacher? I don't do this often, but I'm looking this up right now. Just because I've never heard of this. I wonder if it's just the same thing, or maybe they have another teacher on there who helps him with stuff. Cable in the Classroom. Everybody remember that? Cable in the Classroom, when they came out with that? It was a way to get cable into, basically the classroom, but educational. It's not like they're getting, Nickelodeon or anything on there. There's 50 programs in this series, and each program is 13 minutes long. Short films with spontaneous situations caught on tape in science classrooms. Several very successful science teachers were sought out over months in order to be used as shining examples of their hands-on teaching methods. Originally produced on VHS tapes, but are not in circulation at this time, of course. Hopefully they will be someday. But that's kind of cool that they use actual science teachers, and that's a pretty cool thing. I never heard of that. Hopefully, maybe something exists on YouTube. I can look that up and watch it. But then we got Our Real Monsters at 6:30. One of the great Nicktoons. Just these weird, crazy monsters that were, sort of like, I wouldn't say Disney ripped them off with the Monsters Inc., but sort of, with the whole monster school, and they're disgusting, but to them it's good. And if someone says, "Oh, you look good," and that's not new there. You see that with the Munsters, where someone will look at their house like, "Oh," and they'll go running away. Like Marilyn's dates. The only normal looking The only normal looking person in the Munsters family was Marilyn. But they would take a look at the rest of the family in the house, and their dates would go running off, and the family would like, "Poor Marilyn, she's just so ugly, she can't keep a date." And it's really just, that type of thing. It continues with All Real Monsters. O'clock in the morning, we got Garfield and Friends. Great cartoon, love that one. Followed up with Tiny Toon Adventures, can't go wrong there, love that. Rocko's Modern Life, the great Nicktoon. 8:30, we got Rugrats. And at 9 o'clock, we start Nick Jr., which, of course, is made for preschoolers while regular schoolers are at school. We got You're on Nickelodeon, Charlie Brown. Never was a fan of Charlie Brown. Sorry, I know. Kill me. Then we got probably one of the biggest, when people think of Nick Jr., one of the biggest shows they probably ever think of is Blue's Clues. And we got Little Bear. I love that one. Franklin, I never watched much. See, some of these Nickelodeon things we'll get into is probably going to be like I never seen it or I only seen a couple episodes. It's towards the end of my watching Nickelodeon time. 11 o'clock, Gullah Gullah Island. I love that show. And then 11:30, a cartoon that originally started on Showtime in the morning and then, syndication went to Nickelodeon, was The Busy World of Richard Scarry. Love that one with all the animals in the town. Then we got Little Bear again, Blue's Clues, Franklin. You're on Nickelodeon, Charlie Brown. And then at 2, we go back to the regular Nickelodeon. We've got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon, which is just a way to put Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon, but, it was great, They recorded, like, new bumpers for it, new intros and stuff. Made the Looney Tunes seem new, even though most of the parents are like, you act like this is new. We've seen this when we were kids. And of course, we didn't believe our parents. Like, this wasn't on when you were kids. And turned out it was on before they were kids even. And then we got Tiny Toon Adventures again. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon again. Back to Tiny Toons. So it was like from 2 to 4, it was a Toons hour, or 2 hours. Then we got one of the original Nicktoons, Doug. Rocko's Modern Life again. Cat Dog, which I just talked about. They had the toys at, I think, Burger King. Was it Burger King or Wendy's? Let me go back. It was Burger King. Yeah, Burger King had those Cat Dog toys. Wasn't a hugest fan of Cat Dog. I've seen some episodes and it's okay. And then we got 5:30. We had All That, which was Nickelodeon's Saturday Night Live, which I don't like, or more my style, Mad TV. Their version of that. Music guest they had on was TLC, which of course TLC did their theme song for All That. 6 p.m. Probably the last Nickelodeon game show I remember watching, I know they had some since then, but the last one I remember watching was Figure It Out, hosted by Summer Sanders, and they'd have people on and they'd have a celebrity panel that try to guess what accomplishment the people did, and there was like a word of the day. If they said it, slime would come down on their heads. Then The Secret World of Alex Mack, which I never really got into. I've watched a couple episodes when it debuted on Snick. Then we got Doug and Rugrats again. Then at 8, we got... see, this is the time period where the Nickelodeon went till 9 instead of 8. Of course, they went to 10 on Saturday nights for Snick. But anyway, the Wild Thornberries I never really got into. I know it was made by the Rugrats people, and they had that Rugrats Thornberries crossover movie, which I never seen. I just wasn't into it. And then Cousin Skeeter, another one I really wasn't into. Then we get back to Nick at Night with the Brady Bunch, the Wonder Years, the Jeffersons, Laverne and Shirley, I Love Lucy, and End the Day with Bewitched. So that is our Nickelodeon lineup for February 2nd of 1990. Now quickly I want to go through the TGIF lineup, which of course every Friday night on ABC from 8 to 10 was made for kids and mostly teenagers. Their number one show at the time, their big thing that's going to make TGIF go even higher, was Two of a Kind, the failed Olsen twins show. It only lasted a season. It was advertised as the big, the Olsen twins are coming back to TGIF. Of course, famously they played Michelle on Full House. But, this was, after they become, the show had been over and they become successful in all their Mary-Kate and Ashley movies and books and stuff and clothing lines. But the show, for some reason, kind of flopped. I don't know. I never seen it, so I can't say if it was bad or not. But got to be some reason it only lasted a season. But the show that everybody thinks should have had the number one spot on TGIF, which was, of course, their main show. It's like the star of it, was Boy Meets World. It was in the second slot. Season 6, I know a lot of people say, I don't like the college years. Unlike Saved by the Bell of the college years, I actually like the college years on this. Of course, their time in high school was the prime Boy Meets World years, but I still like this one. This was season 6, their second to last season. I said the start of the college years. This had been a couple episodes after Sean's dad had died, and he went on a road, trying. Of course, Sean, they made his character be moody and everything, and of course, what this does to him. He goes on a road trip with Corey and decides he's not going back, and Corey can't talk him into it, so Corey goes back on his own, and Sean ends up seeing his dad in as a ghost. And then Eric's trying to also deal at the same time with his roommates, Jack and Rachel. Of course, Jack is Sean's half brother, which he discovered, I think, the season before, I think, or maybe I can't remember exactly when. And of course, Rachel is their college roommate. Jack was upset from his dad dying, and him and Rachel kissed, and they started dating, and Eric trying to deal with it. And at one point, he's gonna move out, because he has feelings for Rachel too, and Jack knew that. But he thinks that he's using his dad's death to, the whole dynamic there with those three always was, weird. In a couple episodes, though, Sean does come back, and Corey's younger brother Joshua is born, which not a lot of people remember him because he's just a baby in the original one. The Girl Meets World, which I didn't really care for, but I watched. Obviously he's either a teen or an adult. I can't remember in that one. But then we got Sabrina the Teenage Witch in the third season, which I guess it fell off in viewership or something, but for a time that was like the main one on TGIF. Now it's relegated to the third spot. And then a show that I never seen, it only lasted a season, called Brothers Keeper, ended the day for TGIF. Like I said, I never seen that. I kind of got this mixed up. The talk about everything going on in my life, I kind of want to leave for last. But I'm gonna switch the order I originally was gonna do it. I'm gonna talk about wrestling now. And then I'll talk about those memories at the end. But ECW, of course, had been on pay-per-view now for a year and a half, but the show that they had for this month wasn't actually a pay-per-view because they weren't doing every month pay-per-views at that time. I don't know if they ever did. I can't remember. I know WCW and WWF were at this time. But anyway, it was ECW Crossing the Line 99. It was a February 12th from Queens, New York. And then parts of this were shown over 2 episodes of their hardcore TV show. And of course, this was before they were on TNN. The FTW champion, Sabu, which of course is not a recognized championship, was created by Taz. And then Sabu won it. Him and Skull Von Crush battled to a no contest. And then Taz came out and brawled with Sabu before they got separated. Skull Von Crush is, I guess, more famously known as from WCW as Big Vito, and of course the guy in WWE that wore the dress and lifted up the dress, and the dress was more over than him. If it sounds like I have animosity there, I actually do, because I seen something online where he was talking about one of the NXT characters recently being like a mafia stereotype guy. He's like, he ripped me off, and I shared that and was like, yeah, because you were the first one to pretend to be in the mafia and all this other crap, and you were the first one in wrestling to do that, which obviously he wasn't. There's a history. Look at the ECW originally, where he was in '99. The FBI, they were doing it before, and I guarantee there was other characters before that. But anyway, I just shared it, just joking. Certainly didn't expect a response from him, but he called me out on a post saying, yeah, I'm more over than. It's like, okay, you must like search for your name to see where you're mentioned. But anyway, he went on to do nothing. Ended up trying to sue the WWE for concussions, and it was laughed out of court. But anyway, I'm sure I'm gonna put a hashtag Big Vito and everything I post this on, so you can see it and get on there and throw a fit about me, how I'm a nobody. Well, good for me. Guess what? I don't claim to be a somebody like you and claim I came up with some mafia gimmick. Anyway, sorry. You're getting off topic there. The main event for the ECW Crossing the Line was ECW World TV Champion RVD retaining his title against Jerry Lynn. And of course, that was a series that went on forever. RVD and Jerry Lynn. Fans never got tired of that one. Seems like RVD almost always won. But, yeah, great matches those two always had. And then we got WWF St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Your House from Memphis, Tennessee. It was the 27th In Your House pay-per-view. The only one to date, I think, of St. Valentine's Day Massacre, unless they had, like, sometimes they bring back these old pay-per-view names for NXT shows. I don't really consider those pay-per-views if it's NXT. To me, they're still the training ground or for the WWE, so I don't ever consider that, like, main roster shows. But anyway, at this pay-per-view, Bob Holly, before he was known as Hardcore Coming, defeated Al Snow to win the vacant hardcore title. Road Dogg had got attacked backstage. I'm not sure who by, but he had to vacate the title, and Bob Holly won it. Val Venus defeated WWF Intercontinental Champion Ken Shamrock to win the title, and Billy Gunn was the referee in that. And that was the whole Ken Shamrock's sister Ryan was there, and Val Venus was trying to date her, and Billy Gunn was somehow involved. I can't remember how. I know they ended up continuing this into WrestleMania 15. But the corporation, China and Kane, of course, China had betrayed DX, defeated DX, which was Triple H and X-Pac. And, of course, at WrestleMania 15, Triple H betrays X-Pac and joins the corporation with China. The main event was a steel cage match to determine the #1 contender for the WWF title at WrestleMania 15. And, of course, the story for this is Vince famously won the Royal Rumble, screwing over Stone Cold. And then, of course, he's not a wrestler, so he doesn't want to face the champion at WrestleMania. So he decides he's going to put it up between, I can't remember who he picked, but, obviously people he wanted in the title match. But Commissioner HBK at the time said that's not the way things work. If, the winner isn't able to compete at WrestleMania for whatever reason, then the title shot goes to the runner-up, which was Stone Cold. So Vince is going, whoa, 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 but Stone Cold's like, you know what, this is my chance to finally get my hands on Vince. I will give up that shot, and you can give it to whoever you want. If you face me, if you beat me in this match that I want, and it turned out to be in a cage match, and none of his corporation members were allowed to interfere or be at ringside or do anything in the match. So Stone Cold ends up winning this match, but the way he does is not like under his own power. This was, if you remember the cage of the WWF from the early to back in the 80s, they used this cage. Not the normal cage you see now, chain link fence, but the hard, used to be the blue bars. Just hard metal bars, and people didn't like it because there's no give in the cage. You couldn't really slam anybody off of it without people getting seriously injured because it didn't bend like the steel mesh does. It was actual iron bars. But at this time, they were painted black because, everything in WWF was going black at the time. The black barricades, the black mats, the black pads with the logo in it. So the cage was black. But anyway, formerly known as the Giant in WCW, Paul White, later to be known more famously as the Big Show, cuts his way up from under the mat and beats up Stone Cold, and then slams him into the cage. But because it's those panels of iron, it gave way. It actually broke, and then Stone Cold just fell out and hit the floor, and he was beaten up by Paul White. But at the same time, he won the match. Vince was mad about that. And it started that was a weird debut because it was a cool debut for Big Show, but over the next few weeks, he would just start basically the way his career was already going and continue to go, face turn, heel turn, face turn, heel turn. You could watch wrestling 4 or 5 times a year and see the Big Show acting like a jerk or a hero multiple times. You never know what you're going to get. But yeah, that was all build up for that WrestleMania 15 from Philadelphia, huge show. And then the show that made me realize for sure that we'd moved to Granny's in this month was WCW Super Brawl 9 from Oakland, California. Like I said, I remember because Granny let me order this pay-per-view, so I know we were there. This was February 21st. This is a weird series of events here, but Kurt Hennig and Barry Windham defeated the Four Horsemen, which was the members Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko, to win the vacant WCW World Tag Team titles. Titles were vacant because of another weird string of events. Original champions Rick Steiner and Kenny Chaos. Kenny Chaos got injured, so then Rick Steiner was feuding with Buff Bagwell, so he gets as his tag team partner Judy Bagwell, Buff Bagwell's mom, and then has to relinquish the titles because Rick gets injured, so those titles were cursed. Anyway, Kurt Hennig and Wyndham won the titles. It was a weird double elimination tournament. So, I guess the week before or whenever it was, the Four Horsemen had defeated them. So then they face here at the pay-per-view. And, no, I have that backwards. Do I have that backwards? Let me see. I'm so confused with it all. No, they'd beaten the Horsemen, and then on this night, the Horsemen beat them, and then immediately right after that match, they have another match. So basically, it's a fancy way to say a 2 out of 3 falls, but not on the same night. Anyway, they end up with the titles. That's WCW for you. This whole thing is WCW for you. Case in point, the Outsiders defeated Conan and Rey Mysterio in a hair versus mask match where they made Rey Mysterio unmasked. It was probably like the worst decision of his career, and if he hadn't re-debuted in WWF in 2000, I think it was 2002, in the summer, I think it was, back in his mask, I don't think he would be the legend he is now. He would just been, oh, he had some great matches in the 90s. I remember him. The mask, the mask doesn't define him, but I think without the mask, you see him with the silly, with the rappers and out there wearing the horns on his head, the filthy animals. That version of Rey Mysterio just stunk. I'm sorry. Couldn't stand it. But of course, Nash had to take his mask, just like they took Juventud Guerrero's mask. I don't think it was Nash that took his mask, but Bischoff basically did. But this is WCW for you for sure. Scott Hall, even though he had that mask, the tag team match where I think it was Nash's hair was on the line. But anyway, Scott Hall defeated WCW US champion Roddy Piper to win the title. Piper had recently won the title a couple weeks ago on Nitro. He beat Bret Hart. And then the main event was more WCW for you. WCW World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan, which he'd won the title after that finger poke of doom the month before, defeated Ric Flair in a cage match that saw Ric Flair's own son David Flair turn on him and help Hogan win. But somehow everybody was portraying Hogan as the good guy, even though he was with the NWO. They done the finger poke of doom. Ric Flair's son stabs him in the back, but somehow we're supposed to still feel bad for Hogan, and like over the next couple weeks, Flair turns heel. Like, WCW at that time period hurt my head, even though I was watching it. Anyway, some more wrestling news. Bill Goldberg made a $100,000 challenge on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno for Stone Cold Steve Austin, I guess, to face him in a match or something, which, of course, obviously could never be collected on. And I mean, Stone Cold was probably making more than that in merchandise a week. Like $100,000, nothing. Some other title changes that happened on February 15th Raw. The Rock defeated WWF champion Mankind to win the title in a ladder match, which of course would go on defending that title against Stone Cold, and Stone Cold winning the title at WrestleMania. And also on the same night, Shane McMahon defeated WWF European champion X-Pac to win the title, and of course he would just relinquish the title a month later. And some sad news in wrestling on February 23rd, the Renegade died by suicide. If you don't remember him, it was a guy who was basically brought into WCW to be the Ultimate Warrior. Basically, he had the same character. He came out and squash people, just to get him in a match with Hogan, just so Hogan could beat the crap out of him. And they basically built this guy up into thinking he was like this big, going to be this big star in wrestling, and really had no plans other than just to feed him to Hogan. And I'm not blaming Hogan for his death or anything, or Bischoff or any of them, but it basically led to him making poor choices, and he thought he was going to have this huge career, and it ended up just being a couple months, and then, ran out of WCW. Basically led to all the decisions that caused him to commit suicide. Like I said, I'm not blaming anybody on that, but that's just a theory I've heard of why he did it. It's just because his career didn't pan out. Really, like I said, I'm not trying to blame anybody on that. I'm sure he had other mental issues that people didn't know about. It's just, I don't know why they tried to build him up as the Ultimate Warrior just because he looks similar, and they couldn't call him the Ultimate Warrior. And then they get the Ultimate Warrior later on, and I think it was 97 or 98, and he ends up bombing there. So anyway, alright, now the end of this podcast, I'm going to be talking about some personal stuff with me, so if you don't know me or don't want to hear the details, at least it's at the end. But this is kind of what led to us moving from where we lived in Norwood to my granny's house, my mom's mom. I don't know where to start with this. I've told multiple times on here about my stepdad, Marky Foe as we call him, about how abusive he was and everything else, and how I laugh everything off. But some of this is kind of a serious nature, so don't know if it's gonna be humorous or not until I start telling it. But we'd found out a couple weeks before this that my mom had started seeing someone she worked with at work, while she's still married to Marky Foe. And basically was, saving up to leave him, basically, is what we were told. Obviously I wasn't going to tell, we weren't going to go blab, Mom's leaving you. I was happy about this with everything that was going on. His abuse had just gotten horrible of it. And before I go on anymore, before anybody says, why wasn't your mom protecting you? Until you understand how abused people are and feel, she was being abused too, it's not my story to tell, stuff that happened to her and everything, but I would venture to say that everything she was getting was worse than what we were getting. Most of our stuff was, just, it was what it was, but, some of her stuff, like I said, it's not my story to tell, but there was broken bones and everything else, and I'll leave it at that. So I don't want anybody saying, why didn't your mom save you from this? It's hard to save other people when you can't even save yourself, and you're going through, until you've been through that situation, you don't understand it. So I've never once blamed her for anything. But I know at this time, we were all happy because we knew the end was coming. Just didn't know how quick it would get there. But anyway, we were introduced to this guy named Steve, who ended up being the father to my two younger sisters. Him and Mom aren't together anymore, but I think they're still friends. I just seen him a couple years ago. We went to my mom's for July 4th. It wasn't a couple years, it was last year actually. He just gave me a brand new Windows 11 laptop out of nowhere, just to show that he still cared about me. And we had our problems too. I'm not saying he was perfect and everything. We had our problems too, but he never hit me. I never felt like he was being abusive. He was be overbearing and annoying me at sometimes, but never anything like a Marky Foe type thing. But anyway, we met him on this one day, sometime in January. But we were trying to. My mom he was parked at the end of the street, so I guess because Marky Foe was there. But we went up there to try to find him. I guess we're going to tell him something for Mom. This is our first time meeting him. And she told us what kind of car to look for, and for some reason we couldn't find the right car, even though it was exactly what she said. And we were just walking up, and we didn't even see anybody sitting there. I don't know if because we went back at one point and came back. I don't know, maybe he hadn't been there, or maybe he didn't think we were coming, so he left. This was before cell phones and stuff. So anyway, we walk up, we see someone sitting in the car, so we knock on the window. Are you Steve? And it's just something we've talked about forever, the Are You Steve story. But anyway, this next part of it is kind of hard to talk about because I've never really talked about it before. I might have talked with my brothers about it before, but I don't even remember if I have or the extent I've gone to. So it was one night in February, I believe, if not at the end of January, where I don't remember what happened, but I just remember it being really dark in the house is what I remember a lot. And so it could have been later in the day and they just didn't have none of the lights were on or something. But he was already mad at Mom about something after he got home from work. And I don't know if it could have been anything. I could have gotten in trouble at school that day and he found out about it. I could have done something. He could have thought I did something. Could have been about something else. But I know what it was. I know what it was. It just popped into my head. He was up there yelling at Mom about something, and I just gotten so tired of it. Being 15 years old, I wasn't like a little kid anymore, and it's still hard to stand up to him. Because like I said before, he's 6'7", 6'8". He looked like a homeless version of Hulk Hogan, basically a fat homeless Hulk Hogan. He didn't do the finger poke of doom though. Although I do remember him, I've got problem in my chest today from him poking me with his finger so hard it felt like he was hitting me with something. And I've told the stories before where he broke glass plate over my head, and I ended up getting had to get stitches and everything else. I never got stitches on the top of my head. When my head shaved, you can actually see the scar. Maybe I'll show you guys sometime Although I don't get my head shaved completely anymore. I found great clips around here does a haircut I like, so I don't shave it all the way off. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. I remember him like yelling at her, or maybe I even heard him hit her. I'm not exactly sure, but I remember yelling upstairs, "You get your hands off my mom," or something like that, or "You leave her alone," or something. And he comes bounding down the freaking steps, like these wooden steps. Like, I'm fast as he was coming, I'm surprised he didn't fall over. And I don't remember for sure. I really don't. Whether he was completely naked or had just underwear on. I don't remember. But he came and pushed me over, and then like got on top of me and was like strangling me. Like flat out just strangling me. And I'm sorry, I should have put like a warning, like trigger warning, in case any stuff like this happened to other people that you probably don't want to listen to this. But I just remember like I couldn't breathe, and my mom hadn't gotten down the steps yet because she didn't even realize what was going on. And like I just remember looking over, and there was a screwdriver laying there, and I was like, well, I'm gonna die. Like, I legitimately thought I was dying. So I picked up the screwdriver and stabbed him in his lower section, as we called it in kids. I don't know if I got him in the slop or not. Yes, that's what we call. Like I said, we see nude scenes on TV. We called it parts. We're talking about somebody's thing. We called it the slop. I'm just trying to bring some humor to the situation, I guess. Like I said, I don't know if I stabbed him directly in it or somewhere down there in the leg. I don't think I like caused any like damage. It was just enough to get him to like scream and get off of me. And I guess he ran to the bathroom to check to see if anything was damaged. And my mom comes flying down the steps with Josh and Travis and Clint. Clint was just a baby then. You know, she got them, and you know, I guess he went back upstairs and was in the bathroom screaming, "Oh, he did this, man. You know, I'm gonna call the cops on him." Like, yeah, okay, you're really gonna call the cops on him, me. Anyway, next thing I know, we're being rushed outside to leave. Well, once Marky Foe finds out about this, here he comes bounding down the steps again, outside. Now, this time I know he has his underwear on. So like I said before, I can't remember. He might have been naked. Like, that's how I remember it in my head, but I don't know for sure. But I know when he came outside, he was just wearing underwear. And we're getting in the car, and my mom's like starting to take off. Like, this is something out of like one of them horror movies or something. He jumps like flat out, like fat tub of goo jumping towards the car, about as graceful as he was. But he jumps on the hood and starts banging on it. But like I said, like it's some horror movie or something. My mom pulls back, and he falls off into this like, it's like a driveway, but like the sidewalk part of it. So for years we kept calling him Driveway Man or Sidewalk Man. I always have these weird nicknames for events and people. But anyway, we pull off, and he's just laying there, and that's the last we've seen of him, except one other time was him just laying there on the sidewalk driveway thing. And of course, like I said, it's before the days of cell phones, so we ended up going to Granny's house, you know, unannounced, and over the next year, until the fall, when we got they found an apartment it was like a townhouse type thing, you know, one above the other. I think it had, I think it was 3 bedrooms. Yeah, I had my own bedroom, and Josh and Travis and Clint shared a third one, and then Mom and Steve had another bedroom. But anyway, we split the time. We lived at Granny's on the weekdays so we can go to school, you know, once, you know, and of course I told about my school stuff before, skipping school in the woods and all that stuff. But I'll, you know, that's for other podcasts and some of the stories I've already told. But, and then the weekends, just to give Granny a break from all of us being there, you know, because she'd lost her husband. Our Papa Jesse had died the year before. So that hadn't been a complete year, you know. And now, you know, everybody gonna move in, and Steve moving in. She never even met him before, or even knew about him. You know, so it was all a lot for Granny to take in. So we stayed at the Howard Johnson Hotel. I believe it was in Norwood, or close by in Norwood. It was right next to a Denny's. So we'd go over there and try to win the freaking the claw game, which we wasted money on. And then we could walk to this, it wasn't exactly Norwood, it was, I can't remember, I had to look it up. But anyway, we stayed at this hotel on the weekends, which we thought was pretty cool, even though I had to sleep on the floor. You know, me and my brothers, we would like split, you know, because there's 4 of us, we all couldn't lay, there was double beds, you know. But it was a weird time period. But like I said, knowing for sure that I got in the year wrong. I wasn't in ninth grade this time. I was in 8th grade. And I remember that pay-per-view getting to order it. So I know I was there. So that's why I figured I'd tell this whole story then. Like I said, we met Steve. We ended up having to move out a lot sooner than we planned because my mom was going to save, so we'd actually be able to have a start. Because that was another thing is, why don't you just leave? Well, what's she supposed to do? We can't live at Granny's forever because Granny's getting older and can't deal with all of us, especially as teenagers, especially me being a jerk about everything. She was trying to save so we could start out a new life and trying to protect us, and it's just, and then after what happened that night, there's no way we could stay, and because I think his name was on the thing for the house that we owned, or I guess that mortgage on, so it wasn't like she could have got the place. So it was just, it was definitely a whole situation, but probably one of the toughest things we went through, but also such a like empowering, free. But I couldn't get too comfortable in it. Maybe my brothers did, like, oh, we're not gonna have to deal with this anymore. But me, in the back of my mind, I was like, I just know, like, and maybe part of me was like thinking that she's gonna go back to him, but also the fact that she was with Steve, and that he was moving in there with her, kind of gave me hope that she wouldn't just go back to him. That now she has somebody else, and like I said, I've had some problems with Steve, but nothing anywhere near abusive. Just just little here and there things. But I'm so glad he was there in that situation, because if not, my mom might not have had the strength to get us out of there, and who knows what could have happened. I mean, it's sorry to try to leave you on this note. I do want to thank you guys for watching, though. Next week's a pretty big episode. Not like sure, but it is the 50th episode next week. I can't believe this will be the 50th podcast I've done. Like I said, every week, there's only been 2 weeks I've missed a week due to health issues. Last week I almost missed it because of my freaking eye infection was horrible, but it cleared up quicker than I imagined and was able to get the podcast out. But anyway, next week, episode 50, we're going back to February again, but this time 4 years prior to February of 1995. I was 11 years old at this time and in 5th grade. This time, all the stuff with Marky Foe was going bad. It didn't see no way out. It certainly wouldn't have seen, certainly not as bad as things would get, but also, definitely starting to get bad. We were, like I said, I was in 5th grade, nearing the end of the year in 5th grade in February, as you do. This will be our 4th trip through 1995, so we will see you next week, and thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any comments, anything you want me to add, start talking about, or not talk about anymore because you're tired of hearing it. Just let me know. We'll see you next time.
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons, wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90's never die.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.